So now we'll go through the process of putting the receivers in the field. It's a two-stage process. Firstly, we'll go through in the lab to make sure that all the equipment's working, make sure it's programmed correctly. Then we'll move into the field and actually deploy them so we can track some fish. So Jace, can you please talk us through the different components we need for that process?
Okay, so what we've got here is a Vemco VR2W, the basic components. We've got a serial number that's unique to each receiver, and basically what we're going to do is open this up, install a battery in it and activate the receiver. If we open this up, we've got different components. So you can see we've got the waterproof outer casing. It's important to keep the inner components dry. And this is what we start with. Inside that we've got a silicone satchel to absorb any moisture, and what we're going to do is put a battery in this and actually activate this receiver. This battery comes already wired up, ready for use in these receivers. Literally goes in there, plugs into this socket and is ready to go and activates the receiver. And the next step is to grab this plastic bit. We're going to insert that. That basically keeps the battery held in place. So we've got this O-ring on the bottom and two O-rings on the top. These are important for a waterproof seal. We grease them with a silicone grease. You can see the red light flashing here is indicating that the battery is connected to the receiver and it's actually on. Okay, the next step is to put the internal components back into the external housing. Okay, so we've got our red flashing light on the external part of the unit that tells us that it's activated. And we've got our tightening rods here. These come with the receiver, and this is the final step prior to deployment, where we're putting these in the holes here and actually providing a very tight seal for the unit to keep it waterproof.
Okay, so Jono, now that we've got the gear, can you please talk us through how you actually program that before we put it in the field?
So now before we go in the field, we have to make sure this receiver is working. We need to connect the receiver to the View program, which is downloadable from the Vemco website. So now I'm going to connect the receiver with this magnetic dongle that I've just inserted. Now we're going to look for this unique receiver identifier in the program. So once I hit scan, this receiver comes up in the program, and you can see here this unique identifying number matches the unique identifying number on the receiver. And now we're able to open up this receiver and we can program this receiver for the next project before we deploy it in the field. And now it's brought up the data for the receiver. There's three main steps we need to do before this receiver is ready to be deployed in the field. We need to make sure that this receiver has the correct firmware. We need to make sure it has the correct timestamp. And we also need to give this receiver the correct station name before we send it in the field.
Okay, thanks guys. Now we've got the equipment programmed, we know it works. Let's head into the field and deploy this in the river. Okay, we're here on site. In the lab, we've programmed the VR2W unit. We know that it works. We've given it a site name. We're here at the site. We're about to deploy it now in the water.
And here we've got a VR2W ready for deployment. Our common method is that we use a heavy weight which anchors this on the bottom. We've got a float that keeps the receiver vertical in the water column, and then we've got a cable that actually helps us to retrieve that VR2W when we're ready for download.
So now we'll look at the process for deploying an acoustic release system.
So we're out on the river about to deploy an acoustic release receiver. You can see that here attached to our weight and our floats, and the difference is that we can actually activate this acoustic release and we don't need to pull up the weight to retrieve that and download the data. And this can also be done from the shore.
And now we're going to use the VR100 unit to do some active tracking of fish that are actually tagged in the river.
We're downstream from a hydropower station. We've got some fish in the water with continuous pingers, and we've got a directional hydrophone connected to our VR100, and we're going to do some active tracking of these fish in the river. So by active tracking, what we mean is finding the fish in the river in real time.
It's also important to note that it doesn't matter, every study site's different. You can deploy most of these units from the bank, you can deploy them from a boat. It all depends on your study questions and your study design.